So Santa Fe is a very interesting city to live in. There are about 70,000 residents, and there are over 200 art galleries in the city. So you can see how important art is to this small town that's the state capital, but Albuquerque's a lot bigger, over 500,000 people. But Santa Fe is a comfortable northern New Mexico place to live. And a lot of artists, including painters and sculptors and photographers, have discovered Santa Fe to be a really comfortable place to be. Like myself, I've been here about 10 years, almost 10 years. And it was very comfortable because I came down from Colorado, a city that had a lot of artists in it. It's Colorado Springs. But the city didn't really promote the artists. It was Pikes Peak and it was Air Force Academy and all the military bases around. So art was sort of thriving, but almost underground. I mean, there's a section of the city called Old Colorado City, and there are a lot of galleries out there in that area, but a lot meaning maybe 10 or 15. And here, when I arrived here, it was like just a paradise for art, because what I realized was that there are so many artists here, a variety of musicians and writers and Hollywood film people and photographers and painters, and since the early 1900s they've been coming here, and famous photographers lived here like Elliot Porter and Ansel Adams and Harry Callahan, and these were photographers that, and Beaumont Newhall, who was the first curator of photography for the New York Museum of Art, MoMA, New York Museum of Art. And there are people here who actually worked with those people, which is fascinating because they can talk about those people as if they knew them intimately, which they did. And so some of the gallery owners here really worked with them, and one studied under Beaumont Newhall, who I had never really heard about until I got here. So Santa Fe's been an education for me. And since I've been a volunteer at the Museum of Art, I've learned a lot about the background of what goes on in the Museum of Art. And for instance, there's 20,000 plus items of art in the museum collection. There are about almost 10,000 photographs, historic photographs. I mean, that should give anybody who comes here an indication that the museum sees photography as a fine art. So in my dark room, I have plenty of room. I've got every bit of space filled, but I've got room to do not only my printing with my trays back here of developer. If you were in here, you could smell the fixer. And then I can look at the negative and do the retouching here. And then I can cut my mats and do my own framing right here. So I can do it all. I dry mount my photographs over here on the dry mount press. I have about 60 notebooks of negatives that represents 50 years of photography. These 51 notebooks contain all of the negatives of my photography career. So this is my legacy. They're filed chronologically, so the important thing for me is to remember when I took it. And I do have the different names and the locations on the back of them, so they're not done by people, by names or anything like that. But it works. I always manage to find it somewhere in there. And I didn't mention the enlarger over here. This is my Besseler enlarger, and it's automatic. It raises and lowers automatically. and it fits 35 millimeter and 645 and 2 1/4 by 2 1/4 negatives in the carriers. So as I mentioned earlier in the darkroom, all of my work is film and darkroom work, and I do all the processing and printing. And it's a choice I've made to stick with film and darkroom. And it's 50 years of negatives in a bookcase in my darkroom. And the really exciting thing is that every so often I look at some photographs that I hadn't looked at for 20 years or 30 years or even 40 years and really like what I was doing then. As I mentioned earlier, the cameras that I use are the Nikon F100s. I have 2 of these, and I love the zoom lens. This is a 100 to 300 zoom, and it really gets me in. I mentioned on the Native American dancers, if there are people I want to photograph on the street and I don't want them to know that I'm photographing them, it works fine. If I feel like there's going to be a problem with permission, I will photograph them and then ask them, because if I ask them and they say, yeah, take my picture, they're going to pose for me. So I like the natural stance, the natural look that somebody's just doing, if they're just talking, or like in one of my pictures, I've got 2 women on an Italian street scene that are like into each other's face with their hands going all over them. And I didn't want to stop them and say, can I take your picture? So I shot it and then I asked them. But the zoom lens, the other zoom lens is a 27 to 105, so that gives me a wide angle, a nice wide angle lens. The Mamiyas are fixed millimeter. In this particular one, I've been doing a shoot trying to learn the use of very close-up lens. And there's 3 sets of rings that will get me like almost too close in. This is my Nikon F with the slide copier. So the slide goes in here, and this is a camera back here where the film is, and I can focus and move it back and forth. So, and this is my Rolleiflex, and it's really kind of neat because as you look down through it and you focus and everything's backwards, and I had to readjust to that. But the other thing that this Rolleiflex taught me is what I used to know and had forgotten. When I started using all of these cameras with automatic meters and I didn't have to think, I'd kind of forgotten about a lot of things. So this is making me go back to the Sunny 16 and work from that backwards. So the Rolleiflex is probably 60 or 65 years old, and when I got this, I had never wanted one, and when I got it, I was really excited about it once I started using it. So I'm a very spontaneous shooter. Very rarely will I even use a tripod, but in the studio, if the lighting is not quite what I wanted, I have to use that. So, and the Holga down here. So these are the tools of my work. So wardrobe is important working with models, and even with nude models, because you can start with a certain item of clothing and then sort of work out, and it's very intimate, sometimes erotic, but they love using the hats. I've got about 20 hats in my collection that the models who usually do not wear hats love trying them on. And this Greta Garbo hat back here, which is a real phenomenal, because it's when you use a black hat and it's black hair of the model against the white background, it's very dramatic, you know. So I can mix and match. I can do high contrast high key white on white, or with this tails, Texan tails, white on black. So there's just all kinds of different combinations that I can work with when I'm here. When I'm working with models in my studio, I like to let them find things that they might feel comfortable in, or something that might even challenge them. And I've got thigh-high boots, and I've got high heels, spike heels, and then I've got things like these gloves and stockings, and this turned out to be one of my better props, because the model I was working with, we weren't getting anywhere, and she said, I need a break. And she sat down in the chair perfectly to take a break, and I said, don't move. The arms and legs and everything was just like right where it should have been. I've got things like pearls, necklaces, lingerie, gloves. I think I said gloves already. Just things that models can enjoy and, again, feel comfortable using. The other thing, I have chairs, I have stools, I have boxes, and I can cover them with some of the fabric. One of the things that worked kind of well too is having a model climb up the ladder and sit in a certain way or stand in a certain way on the ladder. When I'm working with a model for the first time, or it's a shoot for the model for the first time, I want them to see what I see. And so what has worked well for me is to have the mirror so that they can see how the scene looks, how the lighting looks, what's showing and what's not showing, and again, as they're looking at themselves, they kind of forget that I'm here, and I'm able to get some natural shots. The other thing about natural shots is when they hear the shutter, often they will relax, and I'm ready. I don't take the camera away from my eye. I'm ready for them to relax, because that's even a much better shot than a posed one. So. Well, so when I first started in photography, landscape was always the thing that I was interested in. I didn't ever really think about portraiture or still life or anything like that. And I also used color film all the time. I wasn't even really thinking black and white. But as I progressed, shooting outdoors and then eventually getting into a studio, I still preferred natural light. So I always tried to find a studio that had a good natural light, whether I was working with a portrait or a figure study or a still life, like you see behind me. So in my studio now here in Santa Fe, I have a pretty good amount of room, space that I can use. The people I work with feel comfortable in it. The lighting here is very good. Certain times of day, sometimes it's really harsh, so I have to work around that. But I still prefer, I would say, outdoor shooting, unless it's something really special that I want to do inside. For instance, I've started doing a lot of still life, tabletop settings, and you see some of these behind me here. And a lot of it is grasses, a lot of it is just simple things, and that's what I want the whole picture to represent is just the simplicity, the minimalism of the thing. But when I work with a model, a nude model or a portrait in a space like this, in my studio, it becomes more intimate when I use available light through the window. And believe me, you can tell a difference with the studio lights. If it gets dark enough, but I still want to do the shoot, I have to pull in a studio light. And that's harsher than the softness and the intimate light with the available light. I try to use black background when possible. Sometimes a white background with a real light skinned model gives a very high key kind of a photograph. But the black background brings out if it's a nude model, for instance, it really highlights the model's features and curves and lines and shapes. So in this studio, a lot of creativity actually comes together. And so this is my legacy. The ones that I've chosen to print and mount, I dry mount all of my work. Believe it or not, it is all categorized by trees and streets and people and models by name. So all of these represent just a small portion of the number of photos that I've taken. So I can, if I need to do a show and I have the right picture and don't have to print another picture, then I'm ready to go. Just have to put a mat on it. I do my own matting and framing too, so that makes it easier. So we've talked a little bit about the style of work that I've done, the subject matter of landscapes and portraits, Native Americans, still life, which is over here with the simple lines. And then a year or so ago I did a whole different style, and it's abstract, and it's very abstract for me, as you can see here. And it's using acrylic paint in water. And when you mix water and acrylic paint, it just gets a life of its own. So that's another style I've switched to. This is being photographed in my library of over 300 books, photography books, 5 of which are my own here. So I develop and print all of my own work, except if it gets too big. And occasionally I've wanted larger prints. So, such as this one, I had to take it to a local shop here in town to have them print it for me. And then they mounted it on aluminum because the paper was such that it would have shown, if we used mat board or foam core, it would have shown all the texture of the board. So this is a fairly large one, but it grabs attention when it's hanging in an exhibit. So in my time in Santa Fe's been good to me. When I first got here, the first year, I had 7 exhibits here, which was incredible. I've done several workshops. I've put group shows together. I've organized group shows of 6 at the most, photographers. I have my own group of photographers that I've kind of developed, worked with. We meet once a week. And these are people that have Hollywood background, film. There's one guy who is film, the photography editor of the year. And when he moved to Santa Fe, he decided to go with still photography. There are a lot of people who are in commercial photography, and they're glad to get out of that and shoot whatever they want to. And New Mexico is just incredible for opportunities to go out as a group. Sometimes we will go on a day shoot and go somewhere around Santa Fe. Or we will go out a little farther into the northwest part of the state and spend maybe 2 nights out there in that area and shoot the incredible landscapes that are just unbelievable. I mean, people who come from the east, I know when I first got here from Colorado, I was amazed at what I saw. And it's fun to watch people that I take out on a tour who are my friends who come to visit and get them out into some of these canyons and layered colored rocks, and they just really go crazy. The other opportunity that was open to me which turned out to be probably the highlight of my photography career, was the Native American dances. Every pueblo, there are about 19 pueblos in New Mexico, self-governing pueblos. And they all have their traditional deer dance and cloud dance and feast days. And I got lucky. Most of the pueblos do not allow photography. But a friend of mine introduced me to some people on a pueblo just north of Santa Fe called Okewenge, and it used to be called San Juan Pueblo. And they are about the most liberal-minded people when it comes to photography. There are certain dances where I can't even get to, but most of the dances are open for photographs, as long as I pay $20 or $25 and I get a tag and I can walk around. Well, I had been doing that for a couple of years. I had made a lot of good friends. And so I went to the governor of the Pueblo and said, I want to have you look at these to tell me if I'm okay with what I'm doing. I'm not violating any kind of sacredness in photographing, because I use the telephoto lens a lot. I use the zoom lens, and I love that because I can get the faces, the expressions of the dancers. And so I showed him what I had, and he was quiet for a minute, and he said, okay, what's going on? He said, would you be interested in doing an exhibit? And I went, yay! I mean, I was able to exhibit 41 of my photographs, and I got everybody's permission, except if there was a whole group of 100 people. I didn't do that, but if there was 1 or 2 or 4 people that were recognizable, I made sure that they authorized me to do that and to use their picture. And of course I gave them a copy of the picture that I was going to use. And when the show opened, it was probably a very moving experience, because when we walked in, all of the photographs, framed photographs hanging on the wall, were covered in black. And I thought, what the? So we all went into a room, the ballroom of this casino where the exhibit was held, and the governor introduced me to the people who didn't know me, and then they gave a blessing in Tiwa, their language, which was, it just blew me away. It was just a very emotional moment, and a lot of my friends, photographer friends, were there for the opening, and it was just really quiet. And then the governor said, well, follow Lee into the hall and look at your photographs. And so I go out and I looked around, and there's a whole tribe of Indians following me. And they started on one end, and I said, look, don't just start on one end, start it anywhere. And so the show hung for over a year, and it was just amazing, because I met all of these grandmothers and grandfathers who said, my grandson is dancing, or my grandson is in this photograph. And I said, which one is he? Is he a dancer? And no, he's in the audience. He's standing back there. looking. I mean, these people really went into their pictures and they loved it. And just the other day I was walking downtown and here in Santa Fe, and a guy walks up to me and says, "You're the photographer, aren't you?" And yeah, and he said, "Well, I'm from Okawinga, and I remember you taking all these pictures." God, that just made my whole day there. But to have that exhibit, it really turned out to be the highlight of my photographic career. I've had some pretty good exhibits around. I've done a lot of workshops. I did one in Italy, and had some work hanging in Genoa. And but this was just spectacular. So that was just perfect for me. So.